about the relationships of your son, Fabio Luiz Lulinha, and your former chief of staff, Marco Aurelio, known as Marcola, with a person who seemed to want to do business with various sectors of the federal government. If anything wrong is proven, what are you going to do about it? What do you have to say about this?
Mariana, I take this very seriously. First, because I'm not a judge. Second, I'm not a prosecutor, nor am I a police investigator. I am the president. And what I say to you, I say to my son, I say to anyone. All of us are required to act correctly. If someone is acting wrongly, that person will have to be investigated. And I'm not a president who tries to stop investigations. I don't threaten to fire ministers. I don't threaten to forbid. Officer, investigate if you must. And everyone has the right to prove their innocence. If that happens, they will be forgiven. But if someone makes a mistake, and that mistake causes losses to public funds, those people will have to pay.
For now, it seems that the government apparatus worked.
Look, I think there are a lot of insinuations. We have to be very careful with that, Mariana, because there are a lot of insinuations. I mean, when things start to leak, and you know I've been a victim of this since 1989, you can't lose your composure. And only you know the truth, Mariana. When someone is taking care of something, only you know the truth. I've been telling people who are innocent, prove it. I am not afraid of being investigated, of taking part in an inquiry. And this goes for my son and for anyone else. No one is immune if they make a mistake. So that's my role as president. My son knows that if he makes a mistake, he will be judged, he will be punished, or he will be acquitted. But he has to prove his innocence. And he knows that because he knows what I've been through. He lived with me for 40 years. He knows that his mother died because of Operation Car Wash. So here's the thing. Only he knows the truth. So let him say it publicly. Let him defend himself. Let the process that I'm accusing, you know? And if he's cleared, that's fine.
If re-elected, would you change anything in the fight against corruption?
Look, see, we have a lot of things in place to fight corruption. Now, corruption is something that's almost uncontrollable.
And inherent to environments of...
No, because corruption exists everywhere. There's corruption everywhere. It's in companies, in the government, in the judiciary. It's everywhere. It's even in soccer teams. In other words, now what we have is an investigative capability like this country has never had before. Because the federal police are prepared for this. The Minister of Justice knows it has to investigate. And besides investigating all the corruption, everyone knows it. When I had the first meeting with the minister, I said the following. Look, everyone here has the right to work. Work with as much freedom as possible. We are obligated to do the right things. If someone does something wrong, they will pay for what they've done. There are no friendships involved. There is already a relationship of trust, and people need to uphold it. Anyone who doesn't will be judged and has the right to a defense. And if they are innocent, great. If they are guilty, they pay the price for their guilt.
Since we started talking about the news, you spoke for 1 hour and 20 minutes with the American president, Donald Trump. Yes, I would like to know what was agreed upon regarding 2 important topics. The first is the heavy tariffs against Brazilian products. And the second is the issue of fighting organized crime here in Brazil.
Look, I talked about several topics with Trump. One thing is discussing the issue of heavy tariffs, which is of interest to Brazil. I told President Trump that more than once. The reasons they use to impose new sanctions on Brazil are false. In other words, we have the lowest deforestation rate in Brazil's history. And I started my political life fighting against slave labor. Therefore, I cannot accept that someone would say they are going to blame Brazil because Brazil buys products from countries that have slave labor. I can't monitor other countries.
Deep down, he was actually referring to China. That's what it is.
And I spoke very frankly with him. And it was a good conversation. Because on the same day, he called his Secretary of Commerce, who called my Minister of Industry and Commerce, and they already scheduled a meeting for next week. So it already bore fruit, and I hope it's very tasty and delicious fruit, because I want to maintain, Maria, a very civilized relationship with the United States. I don't know if it's the American government, if it's Trump, or if it's Trump's advisors. Sometimes I get the impression that Trump is much better at political relations than his advisors. Right? I told him it's not possible. When we talk, everything goes well. My conversation with Trump is very civilized. It's very respectful, both from my side and his. But then, among lower-level officials, they take actions, that are unthinkable. And then, we can't accept interference from any country, whoever it is, in Brazil's affairs. I told Trump, Brazil is willing to work together with the United States in the fight against organized crime. In fact, I handed him a document, everything written down. I told Trump that we are willing to work with him on the issue of the extraction of critical minerals and rare earths. But this time, we are not going to be just exporters of raw materials. We want to process it here, to produce cell phones, to produce electrical materials, to produce chips. We don't want to be exporters of raw materials. And I told him that besides that, we want to have a very, very serious trade relationship with the United States.
President, you've participated in countless elections. You faced all kinds of opponents. Now, you're facing what is likely your last contest. So, how do you see your opponents in this election today? And what changes when running against the current candidates and, for example, former President Bolsonaro or other names you faced at the polls?
Look, I actually miss the time when I used to run against the PSDB in elections, when I ran against Serra, Alckmin, Fernando Enrique Cardoso. You see, in the first election I took part in, there was Aureliano Chávez, Ulises Guimaraes, Paulo Maluf, Leonel Brizola, Afif Domingos, Mario Covas, Roberto Freire, you know? That's how it was. And more men from the Christian democracy, fraternal and Brazilian, he says. But, well, the situation kept getting worse. Today, if you compare today with the competition, back then, you notice that it has decreased. The importance of the politicians who run for office. It has decreased. In other words, there are people who think they can be candidates because of the internet. There are people who think that playing around on the internet or grandstanding online gives them the right to be president. Being president is different. It's different. It's a serious competition. I think Brazil's political process has gotten worse.
You are quite conciliatory, right? Do you believe you will be able to unite the two Brazils?
I don't think there are two Brazils. I think we are living through a historical moment. A historical moment that could dissipate in 2 years. This is a country that doesn't have a general history of violence in elections, of aggression, of offenses, of online grandstanding, because the internet allows the criminals to show up, sometimes with more strength than the honest ones. Thank you.
And that they appear to have authority.
It's because if the guy attacks you and it's a lie, then with respect, he doesn't have to explain anything. What he has to do is defend himself. Do you notice the difference? So here in the National Congress, you get it when a minister goes before a parliamentary inquiry commission. The congressman is going to ask him a question, but he's not really asking the minister a question. He's just doing something for his own phone, so he can post it later. He doesn't even stay to wait for the answer. So the level of Brazilian politics has dropped a lot, really dropped. If you didn't like politics 30 years ago, you have even less reason to like it now. But do you know why people have to vote and have to show up at the polls? Because the misfortune of those who don't like politics is that they are governed by those who do. And if those who like it are a wicked minority, the people will be governed by that minority. I'm proud to say something, and I'm going to say it here with great pride. Why am I the only president who doesn't have a college degree? And yet I'm the president who created the most universities in the country's history, built more campuses, and established more federal institutes than anyone else in this country's history.